BUY, the numbers.
Oh.
Ooh.
That could be catchy. I was like, wait, did you look at the top, like where it says by the numbers? Like, I'm really confused.
Did we just catch that stroke of genius live?
Maybe.
Oh, man. So you got a different setup over there, Juan.
Yeah, I moved. I'm in the new house.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable. I'm really close to the Wi-Fi. I'm plugged in. Like, I'm good to go.
Looks good, man.
Yeah, you're not lagging at all.
I know. Feels great.
Now we just need to get you a light to show off that purty face, boy.
I'll work on that next.
No, I like it, man. I like it. All right, you guys ready? Let's kick this episode off since we're already live.
Do it.
Go for it.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Chase Vernon.
I see you dancing over there, Juan. Jamming out to John's beats. Go on, man. Go on.
The whole time.
Dude, what's up, guys? Welcome on into Fantasy Intervention. We're coming at you hot with another episode of By the Numbers with Dave and Juan. Of course, you did hear the announcement, your host, Chase Vernon, but I cannot do this alone. I couldn't even dream of doing this alone right now with everything going on, behind the scenes at Fantasy Intervention, which, by the way, we had the website up and running. The website up and running. Yeah, did I say that right? Yeah, I said that right.
You did.
Anyways, the website is up and running, guys. Fantasyintervention.com. You guys can go check out our stuff over there at youtube.com/fantasyintervention as well. We've got all sorts of fun stuff happening over there. The quick shots are fire. Everything's fire, man. I love everything that's going on. Dave, your quick shot took some heat today, man.
It did, yeah. It is blasphemous to talk poorly about Justin Herbert, apparently.
God, we'll get to that. But real quick, guys, go ahead and let everybody know where to find you. Dave, you can start it out.
Well, before I introduce myself, first of all, I want to wish you a very happy birthday. The Fantasy Football Intervention, join our circle. It wouldn't be the same without you. So happy birthday. Hope you're having a good one so far.
Yeah, it's been fun, man. It's been fun. Just grinding all day, just like I do every day.
Hey, that's what we love about you, man. Well, my name is Dave Kluge. You can find me on Twitter at DKluge90. That's DKLUGE90. You could also find me at the Pregame HQ, bringing you long-form articles, and you can find me at Fantasy Bros, doing news correspondence for them. But most importantly, you can find me at joinourcircle_, where we're bringing you this stream every week.
Dude, absolutely excited about everything that's going on over there at joinourcircle_. So, yeah, I can't wait for this thing to really blow up where, it's actually going right now. I'm stoked. But Juan, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, I'm Juan Carlos Pena, and you can find me at FF1of-a-kind, and you can find me at TIR_pod, or the tiltisreal.com. That's where you can find some of my articles. But like Dave said, most importantly, with the birthday boy here at Fantasy Intervention at Join Our Circle, don't forget the underscore. And the team is growing when everybody else is fading, and we're just picking up steam. And I am so excited about the offseason. This is going to be fire this offseason.
It's crazy. I showed the team the numbers, and this time last year, it kind of tapered off, right? Like our listeners started falling off slowly, and I mean that's what happens this time of year, right? Because people start losing their fantasy football playoffs, and listeners drop. It's what happens. But right. Yet somehow we have almost doubled our listeners over the past month or so, and it's only growing. And the crazy part is the consistency of all the shows all across the board. And we're seeing at least 1,000 to 1,500 views, and it's been fun. So I want to thank all the listeners out there, especially Fantasy Football Discussion. You guys over there on Facebook keep us moving. So big shout out to you all. Now, let's go ahead and dive into this episode. And folks, we're going to try and get to a few of these questions, but overall, we're going to be covering the majority of this game, or the majority of these games on the slate. So a lot of your questions will be answered throughout the show. We don't want to sit there and try and double up and answer the same question 15 times. If you guys want a direct question for starter sit, come and tune in. We have 2 different starter sit shows. One's at 10 o'clock. The other one's at 11:30. And that's for, youtube.com/fantasy intervention. So if you guys want to know a direct starter sit, come in and ask it during that show. But this episode right here, we're going to try and cover all the games and try to answer your questions as a whole. So we're going to start out with Lamar Jackson, right? Who finally finished as a quarterback 1. Finally, yes. Right? God, man. Like, it's so nice to see him in that section, right? We saw him up against Dallas have a great game, and then this past week, it's crazy. It was absolutely crazy. The game was crazy. And this is something as to where we're not going to dive too much into that because we were already hyping up his playoff schedule for multiple weeks in a row now. I mean, I sat there. I'm in a guillotine league, right? And I dropped Russell Wilson and Josh Allen and picked up Lamar Jackson for these matchups. Not even kidding you. This is the final week of it, and I believe that Lamar Jackson is going to absolutely have a hell of a week. But what we really want to know, right, is the backfield. Like, Lamar Jackson is obviously going to have – well, I shouldn't say obviously, but should have a good week up against Jacksonville. Meanwhile, Mark Ingram just saw 1 snap in Monday night's game. J.K. Dobbins saw 37. But honestly, Gus Edwards was the more efficient running back, and he scored on his only 2 red zone touches. Now, this was supposed to be my breakout game for J.K. Dobbins. I was calling it, and that didn't happen. Primarily because Gus Edwards did snake those two red zone touches. So where are we going to be ranking J.K. Dobbins to close out the season for these fantasy playoffs? And do y'all feel comfortable starting them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was kind of J.K. Dobbins' breakout game. It might not have shown up in the points category because of those 2 vultured touchdowns, but he got the majority of the snaps. He got 2 red zone touches himself, which he was able to score on 1. So it appears that this is Dobbins' backfield, but Gus Edwards is going to be a pretty frustrating thorn in the side of Dobbins owners. Dobbins saw 62% of the snaps. Edwards saw just 27. And like I mentioned, they each had 2 red zone touchdowns. Gus Edwards was just more efficient with them. So one thing is for certain, though, and that is that Mark Ingram's time in Baltimore is done, at least for this year. He took the first snap of the game, and it was a flea flicker, and then he spent the rest of the game riding pine.
That's crazy.
Just absolutely crazy to me. They can cut him this year and save a bunch of money, too, so I think he's gone.
There you go.
This Ravens offense, though, they're just flat out better when Dobbins is in the backfield. In games where he's seen at least 50% of the team snaps, they averaged 29.75 points per game and didn't score less than 24 in a single game. They're averaging just 20.5 points per game, over 9 points more when Dobbins sees 30% or less of the team snaps. In the same vein, Lamar Jackson is averaging 74.5 rushing yards per game when Dobbins sees that 50% threshold. And in the games where he doesn't, there was only 1 game that they played together, and Lamar Jackson only saw 3 rushing yards. So he brings a spark to this offense, and I think that it is Dobbins' backfield going forward.
100%.
That's what I was hoping was going to happen this past week, man. But Gus Edwards, his touches, he'll have 8 carries for 120 yards. Like, it's not out of ordinary. It's absolutely insane.
And 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, what the hell is going on? So hold on. Like, are you on J.K. Dobbins? Like, are you going to be, sitting there running him out there without any fear whatsoever?
I know you don't want to hear this because it's your birthday, but you might have been a little premature. Like, it was just
really.
It's a week early. It's a week early, man. Like, he's at minimum of flex, right? But he's been the victim of the RBBC approach, right? The running back by committee thing that we talked about. But you can see it. He's oozing that RB1 talent. He's 4th in the league in true yards per carry at 4.8, and he's 6th in breakaway run rate with 6.2% of his carries going for 15 or more. So those breakouts have been going the way of Gus Edwards in the last few games, but you might expect to see that change this week. I feel like, anyway. And we saw what Derrick Henry did last week, and he had 215 yards. And the Jags have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to the running back position. So Dobbins is at minimum of flex, but he has upside. And I want to see how the Giants run D holds up against the Browns before I decide if he's a must start in week 16, but I'm definitely firing him up this week.
Man, God, it's still it's just painful because I wanted him to break out so bad this past week.
He's gonna.
I thought he had it in. Come on, man. Come on, JK. Let's
Trust
go.
the process.
Right? It's coming.
Yeah, actually, that's what Scott Fish said to me last night. He's like, you had the right process. Everything you did was correct, but unfortunately it just didn't roll out. So I was pretty much on that train. Now, when we talk about the game, it was absolutely insane just going back and forth. It was probably one of the best games of the year, and it just so happened to be on a Monday night, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Browns dropped to 9-4. They now face off against the Giants. Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, dude, they both finished in the top 6 last week, which is something as to where I was telling people, I was like, you want to start both these running backs in DFS. Yep. So when it comes to this upcoming game up against the Giants, you can run on the Giants. The Giants are actually very porous up against the running back, but teams just haven't been doing it as often for whatever reason. It's really like, I'm very curious as to whether you guys feel that Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb can both be RB1s again, or at least an RB1 and RB2, especially after the COVID reports came out with Bradbury, potentially being out for this game, or actually is out for this game. Like, is this something where we could actually see the passing opportunities open a little bit more, or are they going to run the ball down the Giants' throat this week?
They're going to try to run the ball down the Giants' throat, and Nick Chubb's an RB1. Like, he's locked. He's not. You're not benching him. But if you're thinking about Kareem Hunt, I would consider him at least a flex. Like, there's no way he doesn't finish as a flex or an RB2, given the opportunities that he gets. So it might depend on a touchdown, or it might depend on him catching the ball out of the backfield, like you mentioned, the passing game. So luckily for Hunt, he has at least one red zone carry in every game since week 7. And he did see 7 targets in that wild game against the Ravens. So despite not having a higher than 54.7% snap share since week 8, Hunt has been no lower than RB36. So that's an RB3. Now he's facing the Giants, which, like you mentioned, they're 24th in overall points allowed to the running back, but they're 31st in the league in receiving yards allowed to the running back. So that's where I expect Hunt to do his damage and be able to try to get them. Chubb gets them down inside the 20. Hunt finishes it off. So he might be able to vulture a touchdown and finish, like you said, RB2. Maybe.
Man. Ugh. All right. What do you think, Dave? Where are you sitting on this?
Well, I think both of them finish in, top 6 again. I don't know if we're going to see that. That was pretty insane to see. But I want to point out how effective this duo has been when they're playing together. Kareem Hunt, he's hit the 20-point mark in PPR leagues twice this season, and both were in games where Chubb was active. And funny enough, Chubb actually hit 20 in both of those matchups as well. It was against Cincinnati and then just this last Monday against Baltimore. So Hunt is averaging 14.3 points in games where Chubb is active and just 12.4 when he's the lead back. So it's kind of strange to see, but when his usage goes up, his point total actually goes down. Chubb is kind of like a Derrick Henry light back. He just wears defenses down, and he makes Hunt's explosiveness more of a factor. And in those games I mentioned where Chubb was active, he never saw more than 20 rushes in a single outing and was still able to put together these above average outings. So there's a few running back duos that I think are worth a start if you have both of them. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, absolutely one of them. Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, I think they're another one. And then J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, like we just talked about. Those are duos where you can have both of them, plug them both into your starting lineup and be pretty content with it. Right now, Hunt and Chubb on average are putting together 30.8 points per game. So if you split that up, 15.4 points, if you're getting that from your running back 1 and your running back 2 average every single week, that's pretty solid production right there.
Yeah, I can't hate that take. Like, I think that it's very viable that they could go back to that. I'm just a little bit nervous now because that defense, I mean, we could see this COVID train taking off and, we don't know who's going to end up, with that close contact type thing. Did you guys see anything coming out about that?
You're talking about with the Giants?
Yeah, did anybody else in close contact or anything? So that's something definitely worth monitoring because, they might not need their efficiency could end up being through the roof where they don't even run that many plays. And,
right.
Maybe they don't need both running backs to actually get touches. So in that case scenario, I might actually fade Hunt and let Chubb play. And Hunt could still end up having an RB2 performance in one quarter. It's that bad,
right.
If they decide to take Chubb out. But that's something I want to monitor moving forward. Now, while we're talking about the Giants, let's go ahead and bring up Daniel Jones, right? Because he came back last week, and it was bad. Not a single pass catcher was able to get more than 5 points. It just didn't look pretty.
Yeah.
Now, Daniel Jones is actually far better with a clean pocket than he is under pressure. And the Browns over there, they get pressure on the quarterback the third least amount of time. So is this something as to where Daniel Jones might actually find some fantasy relevance? Or are we throwing the whole entire team for the Giants in the trash when it comes to fantasy? Maybe not, in real life NFL, but in fantasy, are we throwing this whole Giants team in the trash?
Well, I'm happy you dug up that number about them getting pressure third least because that's kind of surprising to me. With Myles Garrett sitting on that line, I thought they would have gotten a lot more pressure than that.
I know,
so
it's crazy,
that's kind of surprising. But regardless of who they're playing, I'm done with this passing offense. I'm done with the Giants. I'm absolutely done with anything touching this passing offense. Out of every wide receiver over the week, only Darius Slayton in week 5.
Oh, Juan's not the one lagging.
Wow, it's not me.
Dude, Juan, oh my God, it's Dave. Dave's lagging.
So you've Evan. Oh, did I cut out for a second there?
You cut out, man.
Yeah, it wasn't me this time.
Oh man, that juju's getting passed.
I'm
All
sorry.
Right. Well, I'll keep it quick. What I was saying is, in every single wide receiver's outing, we've only had 2 times that wide receivers have seen double-digit targets on this offense, and that's just terrible. I mean, that really sets no floor for any of these guys. Evan Ingram, he's seen 6.8 targets per game. He's hit the double-digit mark 3 times in targets. But as we know, targets don't lead to fantasy success. He's tight end 14 on the year, and he's the 4th overall for targets for tight ends. He's tied for 2nd on the year in drops. So, yeah, Gallman, he offers a pretty solid floor as an RB2, but I'm not touching any wide receiver. I don't want Evan Ingram, and I don't want Daniel Jones.
How excited are the Giants going to be to draft a wide receiver in the 1st round?
Oh, yeah.
And then probably like the 2nd or 3rd round as well.
They need one. They need one.
All right, Juan, how are you feeling about this matchup, man? Do you think that anybody is startable?
Yeah, you can't really, throw in the towel completely on the team. And I'm an eternal optimist, but Gallman's been a revelation. He's been an RB2, throughout the rest of the season. Since he took over the backfield in week 7, he hasn't finished lower than RB25. And that was last week against the Cardinals when Deion Lewis vultured a touchdown. That was a week before America first realized that Alfred Morris was still playing football, and he vultured 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks. So, yeah, Gallman's the only one that should be started. But if you're like me and you're a gambler, you want to roll the dice, go ahead and try out Evan Ingram this week. And I know his drops are crazy, and he's got 8, and it feels like 16. But he's got a bunch of drops, and then against the Browns D that's allowing 15.7 points a game to the tight end and the 3rd most touchdowns on the year, I think Ingram could score, which he hasn't done much of this season, and help the Giants keep that game close or maybe even pull off the upset.
Dude, I feel like I say this every single week. Every single week I feel like I see this. Evan Ingram and Eric Ebron are competing with Kellen Winslow, the second, right? For the drop leader at tight end, for the best known dropping tight end of all time. It's got to be those 3. Is there anybody else in the comments that can think of anybody that dropped the ball more often than Kellen Winslow Jr., Eric Ebron, or Evan Ingram? Because I can't think of anybody. I haven't seen anything like that. Wide receiver is different, Dante Moncrief was up there and stuff, but at tight end, I've never seen anything like that.
You might have never seen 3 guys more talented either, which is what makes it hurt
even more.
So that's what makes it all more frustrating.
Yeah. You run 4.42, but you can't catch. It hurts.
Just to give you all a heads up, too, we have some questions coming in the comments. We will be covering Austin Eckler briefly tonight, along with Herbert, Hurts, and Carr. So stay tuned for that. We will be covering that, but we don't want to cover it multiple times throughout one show. So let's go ahead and get on to this next part, because the Giants can actually tie up the NFC East with a win, right? But now the Washington football team, man, they're sitting up top of the rankings. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sucks for them because they need a quarterback. They need an offensive line. This could be the worst thing in the world. All right, so you're a Chicago fan, right, Dave?
Yes.
Okay, so when the Chicago had a dominant defense year after year after year after year, and that they need offensive line, that they need a quarterback, but they're never bad enough to actually get that good pick and to get the guy that they need.
Picking 15 to 20 every single year.
And it kills your team. And this is what the Washington defense is about to do. The Washington football team is about to do. So they do face Seattle this week, right? How are you guys feeling about Russell Wilson this passing game? Because Russ was able to finish QB1 up against the Jets, but that's the Jets. Now they have the Washington football team who's allowing the 9th least amount of points to opposing quarterbacks. I want you guys to keep in mind that Russell Wilson has faced the Giants, the Eagles, and the Rams so far this year, which were his 3 worst games of the season. 3 of those games came in the last 5 of those, right? So what else do you guys think that they have in common? This is a trivia question for you guys. We did some trivia last week. What else do the Giants, Eagles, and Rams have in common?
Shutdown corner. Darius Slay, James Bradbury, and Jalen Ramsey.
Well, there's something up with Slay, too, being questionable as well. But they're actually, you guys are looking at the wrong part of this defense. They actually get pressure on the quarterback, and they're really good at getting pressure on the quarterback. I believe that the Eagles are 2nd in the NFL in sacks, and the Rams, it might be the Rams are 2nd and the Eagles are 3rd, but either way, 2 of these teams are actually 2nd and 3rd in sacks. Meanwhile, the Giants are top 10 in pressure put on the quarterback. So we sit there and we look at Russell Wilson. I went there and I did a huge dissection on this because, like I said, I'm in a league where I have Russell Wilson, and I didn't know whether I wanted to play him or not. So I went down and broke down the numbers. And he has the 3rd best completion percentage under pressure. But when it comes to his deep ball ability, it limits how good he is at throwing his deep ball, right? Even though the Seahawks were losing up against the Giants and up against the Rams throughout the whole entire contest, all 8 quarters, right? He still completed 2 deep balls per game up against all 3 teams combined. Meanwhile, he averages 3 completions or 3 deep ball completions in every other game so far this season. So he's missing out on 1 deep ball completion percentage game, which could also be a touchdown. It's absolutely insane how it hinders his ability to throw a deep ball when he has pressure in his face, but it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. So when we sit there and we look at it, and we look at his turnovers, because he has 5 turnovers in those 3 games, and he only has 2 touchdowns, is this a matchup where we feel like he could still be a quarterback 1? And how do you guys feel about Lockett and Metcalf?
Like, with all due respect to the football team and the numbers that they put up, like, all right, I know Montez Sweat leads the world in batted balls, and I know that could cause problems for us, not to mention the other number 1 picks they have on that line. And they're
Great
really,
stat, by the way. Great stat.
And they're really deep there, right? Now, this could be the case where the numbers don't lie, but they don't tell you the entire picture. So after week 5, when Jared Goff went for 309 yards and 2 touchdowns against the football team, they faced Daniel Jones, the Dalton DiNucci disaster, Daniel Jones again, Stafford, who got them for a little more yards. I'll tell you about that in a second. The ghost of Joe Burrow's knee, Dalton again. Then they got Big Ben and Nick Mullins last week. So Stafford, Ben, and Mullins threw for at least 260 yards and a score. So what do they have in common? Either a high-powered offense or an elite quarterback. So Russ is just that. And now the football team's been preying on these mediocre quarterbacks, but they haven't played anybody like Russ. And as far as wideouts go, like, nobody that we mentioned there has a DK. And so I don't expect him to be top 5, but you got to expect him to finish somewhere near 300 yards with 2 touchdowns, which could both go to DK.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that you still have got to consider Russell Wilson to be, QB1, even if it is on the tail end. But we can't ignore the risk after seeing the last few weeks. He hit the 20-point mark in 2 of the last 5 weeks, and he peaked with 22.6 against the Jets, which isn't really all that great. So Juan talked a lot about Washington's defense, and I want to talk a little bit about his struggles, because but I think this is going to be a DK Metcalf game. Kendall Fuller, Ronald Darby, they're absolute dogs, but they aren't especially big or fast. So I think that they're going to pose a pretty big problem for Lockett. He plays a lot of his snaps out of the slot, but I think that Metcalf is going to eat these guys alive. They don't have the athleticism or the size to really keep up with him. Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, they're the 2 big difference makers on Washington's line, but Russ's ability to magically escape that pressure should neutralize that a little bit. So I'm excited about this matchup because I think the Seahawks are a bit overrated. I think Washington's a little bit underrated. And just like Washington football upset the Steelers last week, don't be surprised if they keep the momentum going against Seattle this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious, like, at this point, that it's something where, hey, Russell Wilson could always have these explosive performances, but I just think that you need to be a little bit cautious. I think you need to be a little bit cautious when sitting there and looking at Russell Wilson as a quarterback 1. Now, the Seahawks, they're going to need a win this week. Like, that's hands down extremely important. This is, like, crucial because of the fact that the Rams, right, who gets faced up against the Jets, are tied with the Seahawks. Cam Akers, explosions everywhere, right? Fireworks just has a dream matchup up against the Jets. Where are we putting Cam Akers heading into this matchup? And does Darrell Henderson still have a chance to produce? Does Malcolm Brown still have a chance to produce? Are we just throwing them in the trash, or what's going on?
Yeah, I've got Akers as a fringe RB1 this week. I've got him in the same tier as Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, and Miles Sanders. Akers had 31 touches last week. To put that into perspective, only 2 other players have seen 31 touches or more in a single game all season. Dalvin Cook did it 4 times. Derrick Henry did it once. That shows that McVay has an immense amount of faith in this rookie running back. So we talked about this all last week, but all the running backs in Los Angeles, they've been pretty solid. That being said, Akers is leading the team with 4.8 yards per carry. Henderson has 4.5, and Malcolm has 4.1. So Akers, he gave his team a huge spark last week. The Rams, they run the ball on 45.4% of their plays, which is the 8th most in the league. So against an 0-13 Jets team, I expect the Rams to just absolutely run the ball into their face over and over and over again. I think Akers is a lock for at least 25 touches, maybe even more if the game gets out of control.
That's what scares me, Dave. The fact that the game could get out of control. Like, the usage, that's what scares me, because they've been the Ravens West like the entire season, right? And coming off that type of workload and staring at the Seahawks next week, like if the Rams get up big, I could see McVay pulling back the reins on the rookie and resorting back to the committee, which worked earlier in the year, right? So Henderson, that Chase mentioned, in weeks 2 through 7, he averaged 85.3 yards on 14.6 touches with 3 touchdowns. So he's clearly, capable, a more than capable running back. Now, Akers is the more talented back, but the Rams defense is going to absolutely dominate this game. They're number 1 against the QB, number 1 against wide receiver in points allowed, number 5 against the running back, and they're even 4th against the kicker. So that's going to give McVay an opportunity to maybe rest up some of his stars, and like maybe Woods doesn't even go, and then they might bench Akers in the second half. That scares me off a little bit, but you're right to rank them right there after the performance from last week.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about the fact that, hey, Cam Akers has been producing through the roof over the past few weeks. And when it comes to rookies overall, I mean, he's up there. He's sitting there 4th, I believe, when it comes to rushing yards for rookie, behind Antonio Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and ... Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's been sick, man. I mean, he's been an absolute monster over the past few weeks. And honestly, like, he was written off a few weeks as a bust. So, like, oh, God, it got me so excited to see him explode as of late. And he has now logged over 100 yards from scrimmage in the past 3 straight games while scoring 3 touchdowns over that stretch. He's got the Texans and then, the Steelers after that. Steelers might be a little bit tougher. So how are we ranking him for the rest of the season? And do you feel confident, rolling him out every single week? Where are we sitting with that?
Yeah, I have him right there where Dave had Akers like as an RB1. This week, he's a high-end RB1, maybe a smash play in every way. But then next week, I might temper expectations, but he's still an RB1 the rest of the way. Like you mentioned, in the last 3 games, he's had 55 carries for 341 yards and no less than 90 on any of those performances. So it's no coincidence, though, that the Colts got back Anthony Costanzo, the left tackle, Ryan Kelly, the center. They got them both back last week after both of them and Taylor missed with injury in week 12 when they played the rematch against the Titans. So we're starting to see the line be intact, and we saw Taylor finally have his moment. The one you wanted Dobbins to have last week, Taylor had it for $150 last week. And it was against the Raiders, and I know the Raiders are banged up, and they came into that game 28th in points allowed to the running back. But this week he gets Houston, and he just hit them for 135 total yards and a score 2 weeks ago, and he finished as the RB5. So that's about where I have him for this week. He has 9 breakout runs on the year, which is 3rd in the league. And it gives you hope, even against the Steelers, who allow only 17.2 points to the running back. They might be gashed the way they were earlier in the season by Miles Sanders and a few others that took them.
Makes sense. Dave, how you feeling?
Yeah, that matchup in Week 16 against the Steelers, it looks a little daunting, but I went through all of Jonathan Taylor's games, and weirdly enough, he's actually more efficient against good defenses. So I kind of split it, how many yards per game these defenses are allowing. And in 7 games where he had positive matchups, he logged 108 carries for 379 yards, which comes out to 3.5 yards per carry. In the 5 games where he had to go against tougher defenses and negative matchups, he had 60 carries for 245 yards, which came out to 4.1 yards per carry. So it's kind of weird to see, but he's getting up to NFL speed, and I think that he's just going to absolutely crush Houston this week. So I'm not especially scared about Pittsburgh on deck. Just for that reason, after starting the season averaging 3.8 yards per carry over his first 9 games, he has averaged 6 yards per carry over the last 3. And the crazy thing is that his usage hasn't really changed at all. In those first 9 weeks, he was seeing between like 35 and 70, I think it was. Over the last 3 weeks, he's seen between 48 and 56% of his offensive snaps. So he's only seeing half of the snaps on offense, and he's still absolutely crushing it. So, yeah, I've got him as a high-end RB2, low-end RB1. And I think that he's going to be just fine Week 16 against the Steelers as well.
My dog is having ear issues or something. He's over here freaking out. I don't know if you guys can hear him shaking.
I can, yeah.
Freaking out. All right. Yeah, sorry for the background noise, everybody. And I'm sorry for this next take because obviously Dave actually writes these show sheets, so I have to ask these questions that he puts on the screen. So we got Taylor, right? And we have the Texans, and they're expected to have David Johnson back in the mix. If you're in the fantasy playoffs, you most likely did not draft David Johnson. But if you are, and you do, are you starting him or sitting him this week, guys? I just need to know. I need to know how you feel about David Johnson. It's just, it's like top of my priority list.
I'm actually sitting in the semis right now with David Johnson in 2 of my leagues. So, there's ways to get around it. You can have a bad draft and still come out on top. And the thing is, if you're there, chances are you have a better option. But if you don't, I'd be pretty nervous about him in this matchup. Romeo Crennel was just feeding David Johnson prior to that concussion. And Dave, I love it. So, he was getting fed before the concussion. I thought he was going to come back from the injury with no Will Fuller and just see even more work than he was seeing before. But he logged a season-low 10 carries without a single catch in the last game that he played against Indianapolis 2 weeks ago. So he was able to salvage that outing with a touchdown, but he logged just 44 scrimmage yards in that entire game. Now he's got to face off against them again on the road while they're gunning for a playoff spot. So, I'm trying to stray away from him. Hopefully, if you got David Johnson, you were able to pick up, Trayvon Williams, Jeff Wilson, one of those other guys, because it wouldn't be a bad idea to play them. I mean, hell, it might even be worth picking up Lynn Bowden and swinging for the fences if you got David Johnson, because I do not like his matchup this week at all.
Dude, Lynn Bowden, first off, is a hero. Like,
my man,
you're going to swing it for the fences. He is the number one waiver wire pickup of the week. But real quick, let me just go over this. Outside of one performance with 96 yards in the ground, David Johnson, highest output. Oh, he had 77 yards in week 1. Outside of that, it's been 63 yards. So, I don't think he's broke. Has he broke 100 yards yet? Nope. Yes, he did. 103, including total receiving yards.
Yeah, rushing. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's brutal.
He hasn't been finding the end zone either. I mean, I think he's got, 3 touchdowns on the year?
Yeah. Oh, man, that's brutal. Juan, are you going to straighten us up, or are you on the same side of the fence?
No, I'm on the same side with you guys because he's totally touchdown dependent and doesn't find the end zone often enough. I love the Lynn Bowden take because I've been a fan of his from the gate. Like, I'm a Dolphins fan, and I was so happy when he got traded there, and I feel like he's a talent that's just waiting to be unleashed, and hopefully next year is the year. But, Johnson, I mean, he gives you a little bit of a floor, like, believe it or not. He's only had the one bust performance, and that was against the Ravens when he had 7.4 fantasy points, and he had 100% snap share that game, which was weird that he didn't produce at all. But since then, the injuries have hurt him, and then with the exception of week 9 when he left early with 10% of the snap share, when he has played, he hasn't finished outside the top 27. So, you can swing for the fences, Dave, and try to get a win this week for the upside plays, but if he's 27, I mean – it's an RB2 or
it's got a decent
RB3.
Floor.
Right. A little better floor than we think or than perception allows. I know we don't love it, but
meh.
All right. I'm going to move on. Davemeh Johnson.
Davemeh Johnson.
I'm just sitting here typing in these titles as I go because I've never used these before, and that was a lot of fun. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about somebody else from this game. We've got Keke Coutee. He's performed all right. Like, he's been okay. What has he had? 165 yards, I think we wrote in the show notes. Yeah, and a touchdown over his last 2 weeks. He's got Kenny Moore this week, who, by the way, Kenny Moore has been susceptible to allowing players to gain yardage. But the biggest thing that I explored with Keke Coutee was the fact that Kenny Moore has actually been really bad up against receivers who can catch and run after the pass. Meanwhile, in coverage, he's actually been decent. So as long as the ball's in the air, Kenny Moore's fine. But if that ball gets in the hand of the receiver, you're going to be paying with some yards after the catch. Keke Coutee isn't really known for his yards after the catch. How are you all feeling with this?
Coutee feels a little bit random, right? Because it's the recency. He hasn't really played as a Chad Hansen, but someone has to catch the ball on that team, right? And having David Johnson back is going to help the offense. And Watson has at least 253 yards passing in every game that Johnson has played. So he makes the offense flow a little bit better. And Keke Coutee could do well despite the matchup. I know you talked about Kenny Moore, but he is number 16 among corners. So he is actually really good. But he just lit him up for 8 catches for 141 yards. So you can't ignore that, especially if it was that recent. And he may not get 141 yards again, but he definitely could find the end zone in this game.
Yeah, I mean, Coutee's the big name in this offense right now, and he was able to haul in a touchdown last week. But outside of that touchdown, he had a pretty underwhelming game. He only saw 3 targets and 24 yards. So Coutee, which was surprising to me, was actually 3rd among wide receivers in snaps. He ran more routes than Chad Hansen, who did a lot of blocking out of the slot. But the big surprise in that matchup was Steven Mitchell. He just played in his 3rd game all season, and he played 92% of the team snaps, which was not only the team high, but also his season high. And he ran a team high 40 routes. So prior to this week, he hadn't seen more than 14% of snaps in a single game. So, if you need a dart to throw, I'd almost rather prefer him over Keke Coutee. He's a 3rd-year undrafted wide receiver that hasn't really done too much in the league, but he's worth a stash in some deep leagues. If he's able to go off against the Colts this week, The Texans face off against the Bengals in Week 16, and he might not be a bad start. So if you got the extra spot, pick him up, stash him, and see how he does this week.
Can Coulter just get an opportunity, please? Just give him just give him a chance.
Yeah.
Give him a chance. Oh, it's been bugging me. All right, so let's talk about another wide receiver in this matchup, because obviously Dave loved this matchup since we have like 5 straight questions from this matchup. T.Y.
matchup.
Yeah,
There is. This is a great matchup, and this is something as to where like there's actually a lot of fantasy relevant players. So I do like the fact that you highlighted this. With T.Y. Hilton, he's averaging 92.3 yards per game and has 4 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks. He's been absolutely phenomenal. And Rivers just all of a sudden found him. Like, he's like, oh, wait, T.Y. Hilton's on the team. I didn't know that. We're, like, wait, this is like week 10 for us, and T.Y. Hilton's on the team? Like, why didn't anybody tell me? Guess what? He's out there. So a lot of people ended up dropping him in the beginning of the season, and he's actually on waiver wires in a decent amount of leagues. You know, obviously with the playoffs coming up, people just haven't been picking up waiver wire options, right? Because they're already out of the playoffs. So is this something where you're actually picking them up and playing them, or are you going to let somebody else endure this roster bomb that could be?
Yeah, so I know this is a hypothetical question, but I did pick him up a few days ago, and I'm thinking about starting him.
That's why. Who would have known?
That's why.
Yeah, his current pace though does seem pretty unsustainable, and I'm pretty worried about putting him in my lineup. More likely than not, he's going to sit on my bench. I'd rather him go off 30 points on my bench than in my opponent's lineup.
Until you put up like -2 points from a fumble by one of your wide receivers.
Right. Or David Johnson that I'm going to be starting in the flex over him. But, he's averaging 92.3 points yards per game. He's never averaged that many yards per game throughout the course of an entire season. When he was 27 years old and playing with an in-prime Andrew Luck, seeing 9.7 targets per game, he wasn't even putting that up. He's only seen 7.7 targets per game over this 3-game stretch with Phil Rivers. So for me, it just feels like a trap, because I don't think that he's a more explosive or a better player now than he was 5 years ago. I don't think that Phil Rivers is a better quarterback than Andrew Luck was. So, there could be some crazy veteran connection going on between Rivers and Hilton. But, people are talking about starting him over guys like Robbie Anderson and Chris Godwin and Corey Davis. And I can't get behind that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go ahead, man. Go ahead. Take it.
I'm going to take it, Chase, because listen, what you said, maybe Phillip Rivers sees 13 and he thinks it's Keenan Allen. So he's just like blindly throwing it to 13. Like, that's a possibility. And he went into this last matchup against the Texans. He was averaging 5 catches for 96 yards against that team in his whole career. And he proceeded to top that, and he had 8 catches for 110. Now, I would start him. I wouldn't start him over Godwin or Davis, like you just said, Dave, but I think I would start him over Robbie. He gets Jair Alexander this week, and I'm a little bit scared of that matchup. And then Godwin and Davis face the Falcons and Lions, respectively. So, yeah, I would probably start Godwin and Corey Davis over him, but I can't ignore the recency, and I want to start him. I have started him, and he's gotten me to week 15, so I'm going to play him too. You're not alone, Dave. We both picked him up.
I'll take it. I understand. I get it. And let's talk about the guy that's throwing the ball, right? We got Phillip Rivers over there. He's throwing the ball, and he's been connecting, and he's been hurting Michael Pittman, right in the heart, and hurting my soul as well. But for real, like last week, we saw Phillip Rivers and his efficiency be through the roof, but he only completed 19 passes. That's the least amount since week 4. Are we nervous about starting Rivers in the fantasy playoffs because the Colts could potentially revert back to the way that they start out the season, which is them just running the ball and Phillip Rivers not getting the completions that he needs? You guys concerned at all?
Phil Rivers, he's thrown for at least 244 yards and a touchdown in 5 straight games. He's also tossing an impressive 10-2 touchdown to interception ratio over that time. His matchup against Houston, pretty solid. They're giving up the 9th most points to quarterbacks this year. Daniel Jones against Cleveland, although I think he makes a pretty solid option because we've seen Cleveland getting a lot of shootouts this week. So the Cleveland defense has given up even more points to quarterbacks than Houston is. They're allowing the 5th most of any team. So I like Rivers, but I think that there's some other guys that you could pick up on as streaming options this week, like Daniel Jones, that might be a little bit safer of an option.
Juan, how you feeling about that?
I feel like Jones scares me, man. Like we started the whole show with we're fading everybody on the Giants, and like I feel like we should probably stick with that. Like Jones has thrown 19 interceptable passes. He's got the He's number 5 in the league in danger plays. The Browns are 8th in sacks and 4th in takeaways, which makes Jones like borderline unstartable. Like he has a 30th ranked completion percentage when throws under pressure. So I just feel like Rivers is safer against the porous Houston secondary, given the weapons. Like you mentioned, Pittman, maybe he's due for the bounce back game and they make a concerted effort to take away T.Y. Hilton. But I think I would rather start Rivers over Daniel Jones. But I feel horrible about both of them.
Yeah, I would. Yeah,
Like, really.
I would never start Daniel Jones over Rivers. Like, what are you thinking? Man, you were off your rocker, and we're getting into this next topic. You are off your damn rocker.
Hey, man, it's playoff.
I thought you
weird
loved
right now.
You love Danny Dimes, Chase.
We were talking about streaming guys, right? And who we wanted to stream. So we might as well bring up streaming defenses, Dave.
Hey, there's still in like 70% of leagues still have defenses in them. It might not be the popular thing, but a lot of people that are watching the show on Facebook right now, they're looking for a defense this week.
I'm just giving you shit because I actually do like defenses, and I do not think defenses should be eliminated. In fact, like I'd rather do IDPs, but I don't think defenses should be eliminated. I think the defenses are a crucial aspect of fantasy football, to be honest with you. And maybe that's because I study defenses and I study matchups. And
good,
so I
got
kind
two
of
questions about him.
Not 1, 2.
I can't with these guys. I can't.
Hey,
all right.
man.
Who is your stream of the week? Juan, for defenses.
Yeah, there's a few defenses that are options, but I like the Bills. They're owned in 55% of leagues, so they may not be available in yours, but they rank 6th in interceptions, and it's all about matchups, like you just said. They're facing Drew Lock. Now, he's thrown 13 picks in his last 8 games. They have Matt Milano back to quarterback that defense and help with the coverage. They got Levi Wallace back a few weeks ago and has made a little bit of a difference, and they've looked different since. They gave up 244 yards to the Steelers last week and held them to just 15 points. I'll take that defense and run with it for the week.
Yeah, you know, but the streaming option I had on here when I first looked at the numbers, you see the Cardinals D going up against Philly, and that looks like it's going to be a nice matchup. I know a lot of people are talking about that as a streaming option, but I would strongly advise against betting against Jalen Hurts right now. They just scare me a lot. The 49ers, they've given up big games to defensive and special teams in 3 of their last 4 games. When they played against the Saints, the Rams, and the football team, they gave up huge games to those defenses. So they did a decent job against Buffalo, but it sounds kind of crazy with the 49ers playing Dallas this week, but Dallas might not be a crazy, terrible streaming option. You know, at this point, waivers have already gone through. They're probably still sitting out there. If you're desperate, picking up Dallas and playing them against the 49ers might not be a bad call.
All right, man. Okay. All right, fine. I'll take it. I don't hate it, but that's a tough one, sitting there and getting behind the Cowboys defense. But guess what? They performed last week. So, oh, man. I guess we got to go on to another defensive question since we're on the topic of defenses, Dave. The Rams DST has been on a tear the last few weeks, and they really have. They've got the Jets and the Seahawks we brought up, earlier. And yeah, this is something as to where do I feel comfortable plugging them in, or am I looking for a different streaming option up against the Seahawks in week 16?
See, I wanted to talk about this question because this time of year when you're in the playoffs, you're not just planning for this week. You're planning for this week and next week. And I know a lot of people right now, they're looking at that Rams schedule and they're getting scared in week 16. And I'm here to talk those people off a ledge because I think that they're going to be just fine. A lot of people want to have that backup when they've got the Rams right now, but they have just been on an absolute tear. That being said, the Rams defense, they're looking elite at every single level right now. Their secondary, their pass rush, they're generating a push at the line, they're shutting down pass catchers, and they're scoring on defense. Over the last 5 weeks, they have 7 interceptions, 4 fumbles recovered, 2 touchdowns, and 17 sacks over the last 5 weeks. And in those games, they came against the Seahawks, Bucks, 49ers, Cardinals, and Pats. It's not like they've been playing a bunch of slouches. So they're my top-ranked defense this week because they're going up against the Jets. But I think they're going to fare just well against Seattle in Week 16. In their last meeting, they had 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and 6 sacks. We talked about it earlier in the show, how Russ Wilson struggles when he's under pressure. Well, guess what? The Rams, they can put out a lot of pressure. In addition, they've got this guy named Jalen Ramsey who matches up pretty well against DK Metcalf. So I think that the Rams, if you've got them, don't worry about picking up a backup. Keep them for the next 2 weeks and just coast all the way to a championship if you got the Rams.
I'll take that.
It's Chase's birthday. You could have just been like Aaron Donald and been done. Like that would have been good.
That guy's pretty good too.
Pretty good, right? Like I said it earlier, like Dave just did a great job digging into all those numbers. number 1 against the quarterback in fantasy points allowed, number 1 against the wide receiver, number 5 against the running back, and even the damn kicker can't get any love. They're number 4 against the kicker. Like, they stop everything. Like, their defense is a juggernaut, and you don't bench that kind of defense when they're on that kind of run. Dave knows, as a Bears fan, like, there were years where you started the Bears defense with your eyes closed and you just lined them up and rolled them out there every single week.
All right, so let's go ahead and hop on to our next question, something that I know that Dave is absolutely in love with. And actually, I am too, because he was my sleeper pick yesterday in the Scott Fish episode. So I love it. And I cannot wait to get off of defense talk. So no, Mitch Trubisky has thrown for at least 242 yards in 3 straight games, tossed 7 touchdowns over that stretch, putting up a minimum of 18 fantasy points per game. In each game. Is he a viable quarterback 1, and is he over or under 50 fantasy points this week?
I'm smashing the over. Life's too short to bet the under. We all know that. No,
unless it's about Justin Herbert.
Right. We'll get to that in just a minute here. So saying that Mitch is a QB1 lock, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think that you can start him in 12-team leagues and be just fine. Minnesota's D is in the bottom 1/3 of points allowed to quarterbacks. The one thing that worries me, though, is Mitch Trubisky has historically struggled a little bit against the Vikings. And in 5 starts, he's got a 2-3 touchdown interception ratio against them, and he's averaging just 168.2 passing yards per game. So, well, he's got, a bit of a value as a rusher. He's never scored a rushing touchdown against the Vikings either. So, I like his matchup a little bit this week. I think that you can get away with starting him, but he's not somebody that you're, expecting 50-plus points out of.
Yeah, listen, I completely agree. Like, I'm tempering my expectations. And that same Vikings D that you talked about, they're in the bottom 1/3, but Tom Brady only had 23 pass attempts last week. So I can't trust Trubisky to have that kind of game where he's going to have the volume enough to carry him. And we usually love that rushing floor that you mentioned. But not only has he not scored against the Vikings, but the Vikings are giving up the 3rd fewest rushing yards to quarterbacks on the year. So I'm going to temper expectations on Trubisky.
But I think he falls into that like 12 to 15 range. You can get away with starting him this
Probably.
week.
It's a rough week, but yeah.
I think he puts up over 50 points this week. Easy.
50 fantasy points, or are we talking 7+ touchdowns?
Oh, we're talking like 7+ touchdowns and 50 fantasy points combined.
How
Darren Waller went off and had the 200 yards, 2 touchdown game up against the Jets. That's where Mitch Trubisky's probably sitting, but in the quarterback range of this thing. So let's go ahead and bring up the guy on the opposite side of the field, Kirk Cousins over there, who, by the way, Mike actually brought this to my attention. Big shout out to Daddy's Home FF. You guys can find him on Twitter. Man, he's sitting there and he brought up an excellent fact. Regardless of how tough these teams have been, he's thrown for at least 3 touchdowns when playing at home so far this season. I believe it was since like week 4 or something along those lines. Either way, we talk about the weaknesses for the Bears, where they struggle with wide receivers in the slot. They're actually in the bottom 5, I believe, in wide receivers in the slot, or against the wide receivers in the slot. Meanwhile, Jalen Johnson over there has given up some major big-time plays, which Justin Jefferson could be lined up against him. So is Kirk Cousins going to be a quarterback 1, or are we fading Kirk Cousins? Is he going to continue the 3-touchdown trend that he's had at home this entire season?
Yeah, I think he makes for a quarterback 1, but a pretty boring quarterback 1 at that. If you look at his career over the Bears, he's 3-3. He's averaging 242 yards with 7 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. The big thing is he's taken 16 sacks in those 6 outings. Something that's kind of weird, though, is he's actually logged 6 rushing touchdowns against the Bears, which is more than any other team that he has ever played against. So I think you could expect, 254 yards, couple of touchdowns, handful of sacks. I think he's going to finish as a low-end QB1. And I think that playing against the Bears, even though they are going to be in Minnesota, I think that it limits his upside just a little bit. I think that 3-touchdown streak that Mike talked about comes to an end this week.
Definitely see that happening. How you feeling, Juan?
Yeah, I'm not actually too scared about that streak ending. I think he might continue to do that. I'm going to start him over Danny Dimes, if you know what I mean, if we're asking the question. But it's a case of weapons. And in the last matchup against the Bears, Jefferson had 135 yards receiving against, like you said, Jalen Johnson. Thielen caught 2 touchdowns. So it's not sexy, but it's better than Locke or Danny Dimes or maybe even Herbert tonight, as somebody that you might want to take advantage of their weapons on the outside. You think about Dalvin Cook, right? So Dalvin Cook had enough success to manage 96 yards in his last matchup against the Bears, who are pretty good against the run, but that should still create some opportunities for the play action game, which Cousins is actually struggling right now, but maybe he'll turn it around. He's currently 30th in play action completion percentage at 61.8%. So look for that to improve this week, and I think he has a decent game.
Man, this next one is really getting to me. I'm trying to type into the banner so I can, get this out, but I'm really curious about the whole situation going over there with Ronald Jones. What's going on over there? Real quick, Dave, can you tell us what's going on over there, and then I'll finish off the intro?
Well, he broke his pinky finger, had surgery on that. That kind of put his ability to play on Sunday in jeopardy, and then he landed on the COVID list. So, I mean, it looks like there's no chance that Ronald Jones is playing this week.
Oh, man, it's absolutely hurt my soul because of the fact that we had Leonard Fournette being a healthy scratch last week, and it's driving me absolutely insane. I don't get it. Like, why was he a healthy scratch? Did anybody hear anything?
Nothing. No idea what the hell is going on.
No reasoning, no idea, no.
Oh, man, it's driving me nuts. So if he's unable to play, who are we going to start at the running back over there? They've got a decent matchup, right? Like, come on.
Theoretically, it's a good matchup, but you have to start Fournette because it's the opportunity. But it's a tough ask right now to trust him in Week 15 and throw him into your lineup with everything on the line. And the Falcons are better than people think against the run. They're tied for 6th against the running back in points allowed. And Tampa's going to be looking to throw the ball against that weak Atlanta secondary. Like AJ Terrell is 95th among corners, and he's going to go up against Mike Evans. So I expect a lot of that. Fournette does offer a little bit of opportunity for points in the passing game, and he did have a stretch of 3 games with at least 6 targets, but he really didn't do much with those. He only had 107 yards receiving on those with 15 catches. So 0 touchdowns receiving. Hopefully you made it this far without needing him, and you don't have to use him, and you have a better pivot out there somewhere because I really don't trust it.
Yeah, if this happened a couple weeks ago, if Ronald Jones was out with COVID, I'd be saying Fournette's an RB1 smash play, but things are just so weird over there right now. With this healthy scratch last week, and then I noticed something weird. I was looking at their depth chart, and LaShawn McCoy actually got bumped up to the number 2 on their depth chart right now. So I'm not sure what to make of that situation. I don't know if that means that LaShawn McCoy is the backup now. What I do know that means is that I'm not touching this backfield with a 10-foot pole. This could be a Keyshawn Vaughn week. This could be a LaShawn McCoy week. Maybe Fournette comes back after a week off and just tears it up. Either way, I'm not willing to roll the dice on it, so I'm just avoiding it altogether.
Oh, God, this is not getting any more clear for me. All right, so let's talk about our next guy. We got Gurley over there up against Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. It's not going to be pretty. What are you guys thinking?
Well, what really jumped out to me, 37%, 33%, 33%. That's been the usage that Todd Gurley has seen over his last 3 games. 37% is the most snaps that he's seen. The kind of weird thing is that he's seen 6 total red zone touches in that matchup. All the other running backs combined on that team have seen 4. So he's still the preferred red zone guy, but he's not really getting anything outside of that. So if you're banking on this putrid Falcons defense or offense to get into scoring range to make Gurley relevant, you're going to set yourself up for some disappointment. Their red zone the red zone scoring percentage right now is 48.9%, which is by far the absolute worst in the league. Over the last 3 games, it's been even worse than that, just 41.7%. So it's frustrating to see because they're putting up yards, but when it comes down to it, they just can't score, even with Gurley there. So it's not a risk I'm willing to take. I think that if you got Gurley, bench him, pick up some of those guys we talked about earlier, Jeff Wilson Jr., Peyton Barber, DeAndre Washington, Lynn Bowden. Those are all guys that you can get off of waivers that I'd feel comfortable starting over Gurley this week.
What about CH over there? Is CH a play?
Yeah, I love CEH, but I guess I would start him over Gurley if that's the question you're asking.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the next guy up here on the docket, right? Did I actually hit that? Am I in the right order? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we got CH over there. Where does he sit in your week 15 rankings?
I mean, he can't be really higher than a mid-range RB2, and that's just hoping that he can repeat the work from through the air last week. He had 5 catches for 59 yards, and that gives you a little bit of hope that he's going to be able to perform against a defense that had not allowed a 100-yard rusher in 55 games, only to give up 2 in the same week against Hurts and Miles Sanders. I know Sanders had a huge run, and that's going to bolster his stats, but we've been waiting for a signature play from CH, and this could be the week. You were waiting for the big J.K. Dobbins breakout. This could be a sneaky breakout game for CEH. But at least the floor with the passing work makes him an RB2.
Yeah, he's coming off a season high 74% of the team snaps, and Le'Veon Bell was vocal about that on Twitter. I don't think that's something that Andy Reid is going to take too kindly to. The kind of worrisome thing about CEH last week is that he only averaged 2.0 yards per carry against the Saints, which is just abysmal. The Saints are allowing the second fewest yards to running backs, 31 yards less per game than the Dolphins. So if Darrell Williams is inactive again, I think that, CEH's volume alone is going to push him into that RB2 category. But really, he just hasn't been that great, and he's got a pretty tough matchup this week. So I'm pushing him into like the low 20s in my rankings if Williams is active in this week.
Man, this is tough. We're going to get on to one more guy, and then we actually have our hot takes after this and our final game say for this one coming up. So thing I want to ask you guys is, does Michael Thomas live in a house made for hobbits with a very low ceiling?
I mean,
yes.
I think the question, does he live in a house for hobbits? Yes.
I rephrased your question over there from what you wrote, Dave. I think you said his ceiling is capped because Taysom Hill's under center. So how are we feeling about him? Can we find, maybe 3 wide receivers that we confidently start over top of Michael Thomas?
Yeah. When you look at Michael Thomas, the volume and the yardage, they've both been there, but it just, it's not coming together for whatever reason. He logged 9.3 targets per game and 7.5 receptions per game for 85.8 yards per game, which all sounds good. If we had a couple of touchdowns peppered in there, he'd be in the wide receiver 1 discussion. The problem is he is not getting those touchdowns because they run the ball when they get in the red zone with Taysom Hill. So, I kind of was looking through my rankings, 3 guys that probably wouldn't be expected to be ranked above Michael Thomas that I have: Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans, Robbie Anderson. I would start all 3 of those guys confidently above Michael Thomas this week.
Yeah, I like those names, Dave. Like, I would start Ayuk, especially we don't know what's going on with Diggs and whether or not he's going to play for the Cowboys. That's a great matchup. Mike Evans is going up against A.J. Terrell that I mentioned, 95th ranked corner, so I like that one too. But not against Robbie Anderson. I think that's where I would start Michael Thomas over him. I mean, in the last 2 games, he has 17 catches for 193 yards. So that gives you hope. And like you said, he hasn't found the end zone yet, but maybe this is the week that Bilbo Baggins and him go on a little mission and find the end zone. It could happen.
It could.
Oh, man. All right. So we have our hot take of the night, something as to where we're going to talk about this Thursday night game, see what happened, see if we can kind of hit the nail on the head. And there's a lot of question marks in this one. Half the defense is missing for the Raiders, maybe not half, but 3 of their core players are missing. Meanwhile, Keenan Allen, limited snap count, but he is active. Mike Williams is out. Is Joe Reed
finally?
Is Joe Reed finally going to break out? No, honestly, like with Hill over there, KJ Hill, he's actually been seeing a higher snap count. But I think that honestly, Joe Reed could still see some upside. What do y'all feel? Like, what's your hot take for tonight's game?
Well, we already mentioned the wide receivers that are out, but they're also missing 2 of their starting offensive linemen, including Brian Bulaga. So they're hurting everywhere on offense this week. I know people are going to hate hearing this, but my hot take, Justin Herbert is going to throw more interceptions than he's going to throw touchdowns, and he's going to take at least 3 sacks in this game. I get it. Herbert, he's got all the talent in the world, but I think he's in his own head right now. The Chargers are losing. He's being doubted. And don't forget, he wasn't even supposed to play this season. Had Tyrod Taylor not been stabbed in the lungs by his team doctor, this might still be Tyrod Taylor's team with Herbert on the bench. So I think that he just bit off a little bit more than he can chew. Check out my quick shot video from earlier today because I talk about it. In the first 9 games, Herbert was on fire. We know that. He had a floor of 250 yards and 1.5 touchdowns every single week. He was averaging 300 yards per game over the first 9 weeks. Over the last 3 games, he's averaging 253 yards per game. He's thrown 3 touchdowns and he's thrown 4 interceptions. He's been sacked like crazy. And the wildest thing is that he hasn't been running the ball. He has 2 rushing attempts for -2 yards over the last 3 weeks. In games that Austin Eckler's played, he is not running the ball. Austin Eckler has taken that away from him. It's just things are not trending in the right direction right now for the Chargers or Herbert. So if you've got Herbert, might want to look somewhere else tonight. Hate to say it.
Benching Herbert's going to get you killed. Saying that it's definitely going to get you killed, especially when he finds Joe Reed for Chase's birthday present on a long bomb.
Dude, he's going to find Joe Reed for like a 5-yard dump off screen pass, and Joe Reed's going to take it to the house. Meanwhile, Austin Eckler is going to take 2 more screens to the house from the running back position. So, oh man. It's
Speaking of
sketchy, but go ahead.
Yeah, speaking of running backs, my hot take is also maybe going to get me killed, but I think Josh Jacobs goes for like 2 bills tonight. I think he gives the middle finger right back again to Matthew Berry and everybody else who he gave the middle finger to. And he has like the best game of the season. He's only had 2 100-yard rushing performances this year, and I expect them to be up. Keenan Allen limited, Mike Williams out. It's going to hurt the Chargers, and I feel like the Raiders – they're going to give up 30 points somehow, some way, because they just can't avoid doing that. You know what I mean? But they'll win the game, and Jacobs has a big game and goes for 2 bills. That's my bold prediction.
Would that be the best touchdown celebration ever? Josh Jacobs runs in the end zone, runs straight up to that camera, and just flips the bird.
If he stops at the one and gives the pylon the middle finger, the pylon cam, that's the one. Like, just I'm going to stop on the one. I'm going to give it the middle finger. Let Booker come in and finish it. And here you go, Matthew Berry. Take that. That would be the ultimate middle finger.
I love it.
All right, so real quick, we do have some questions to answer for some of the people that just joined in, and we will answer a few of these questions. But I want to get our show for our podcast underway. So go ahead, real quick, Dave. Where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at DKluge90. That's DKLUGE90. You can find me here every Thursday night. You can find me here also on Sunday mornings doing a start sit show at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find me on the Pregame HQ writing long-form articles, and you can find me at Fantasy Pros on their news correspondence desk.
And once again, that's at youtube.com/fantasyintervention. Juan, what you got, man?
Yeah, you can find me at FF1 of a kind. You can find me at TIR_pod on Twitter as well. I'm at thetiltisreal.com, but I'm also here at joinourcircle_. We do this show every Thursday. And yeah, look forward to this every week.
Dude, it's been fun. It's been a blast.
It has been fun.
All right, guys. Thank you all.
I didn't lag.
You didn't lag. Is this the first one? Is this the first? No, you had one.
This is me.
Yeah,
this is me.
Yeah, you.
I was the one lagging.
We have to go one show without a lag. All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you guys for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out, but we're not really.
But not really.
All right, real quick. Let's just run through some of these questions because I have to do my DFS stuff. Dobbins, McKissick, Beasley, Landry. Pick 2 full PPR.
Dobbins and McKissick easy for me.
Go for it. Yep.
I'm going to go Dobbins, and I think I want to go Beasley on that one, but McKissick is close. Landry has a great matchup. And yeah, with Bradbury out and everything, like there should be plenty of passing. I'm actually going to go Dobbins and Landry. I'm going Dobbins Landry. Locking in.
Like it.
All right, Herbert or Watson. Sticking with Herbert right now because the playoffs absolutely not. You go Watson up against the Colts. You guys disagree or agree?
No, he threw for 341 last time he played him. Yeah, he's going to throw for yards. Yeah.
Yeah,
Watson. I'm going Juju to be safe in this one. And honestly, I think I might like the matchup better for Juju anyways, although it's close if he was healthy, but no. All right, for rep count for Keenan Allen, a go or Tim Patrick. This one, out of all the questions that I saw as we were going through the show, this is probably the closest one for me because I'm not a big fan of Tim Patrick. I know that he can see some sort of upside, but it's very capped. Meanwhile, Keenan Allen's floor could be equivalent to Tim Patrick's upside.
Right.
I know he could be capped on his snap count, but if it's a competitive game, Keenan Allen's going to be in there.
Yeah, no Arnett, no Abram. That secondary's banged up. That whole Raiders team, I think Keenan Allen gets enough work.
Yeah.
All right, Keenan Allen or T.Y. Hilton? T.Y. Hilton for me.
T.Y.
Even though I was fading him earlier, I'll still take him over a limited Keenan.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do this last one, then we're going to go down to the bottom, and I need to get out of here after these next 2 or 3 questions. Jalen Hurts going off this week for over 200 passing yards, 100 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 2 passing touchdowns.
No, that dude's on the other team. That dude's Kyler Murray. He's not that yet. Easy, but let's pump the brakes.
All right, real quick thoughts on Patrick this week. Is Tre'Davious White going to cover him most of the game? I believe that he will. I actually talked about this over the past 2 episodes, which is why I don't like him. I think that Jerry Jeudy could actually have a game this week. Mm-hmm. Jerry Judy's been getting wide open. Like I don't know what Drew Lock is seeing out there, but if you've seen any of this film, I'm telling you guys, Jerry Jeudy is wide open. Just time after time again, he is burning these defensive backs, and he is being left like, "Hey, I'm over here. Like, throw to me the ball." Like, if they need to work, Shermer needs to work something into this play calling over there, where it involves Drew Lock looking Jerry Judy's way more often than just one time for 1 second,
making him the number one.
Well,
If you make him the number one option,
he's supposed to be the number one man. I don't know why he's.
Yeah, I don't know why he's not.
That's not the number one read, though. You can tell he's looking at him later, and then it's too late by that point. He's wide open, like you said, and he missed him.
I don't like it. All right. We're going to get out of here, guys. Good luck tonight. Good luck in your DFS shows. Good luck in your DFS lineups. Good luck in your playoffs. We'll see you guys next week for those of you who made it to the championship. Later.
Later.